Hello again. At one time, ethnic monitoring was a merely passive tool used to observe what was going on. It was never intended to be a means of compelling people to behave in this or that way. It just recorded what was happening. These days, ethnic monitoring is a cutting-edge tool or weapon of a particular ideology. Let me explain this by drawing attention to the fact that in Britain, the Financial Conduct Authority, which regulates organisations which handle our money, is now requiring companies to tell them how many ethnic minorities they employ and in what capacity, and further making recommendations about how things should be in that respect. Time was when the FCA used to keep an eye out for swindlers and cheats, and it would step in to denounce dodgy companies and try and protect us from being exploited. These days, it is more worried about how many black people are on the boards of companies. Of course, this kind of thing is on the increase in many fields. For example, films, advertising, the theatre and opera. If you want a grant from the Arts Council for your opera, you will have to demonstrate that you have enough ethnic minorities involved with it, and also that your audience reflects the community you serve, to use the modern jargon. This is, of course, why you see so many black people on television these days or in stage shows. This is all very well in the examples which I've given because the consequences are unlikely to be dramatic or hazardous to life. Insisting that the board of a bank or investment company has enough black people in it, or that senior staff are not all white, is unlikely to harm anybody. The worst that will happen is that you might get poor financial advice from such a company about your investments. In much the same way, an opera company which ensures that it has black singers, even if they're not particularly good, will not affect us too badly. It will just mean that we find operatic productions becoming more mediocre, something which many people have observed but few like to mention out loud. If you recruit singers and actors by skin colour rather than talent, just to satisfy some arbitrary quota, you're bound to find that quality has to be sacrificed. So far, the worst danger of this social engineering has been poor advice about investments and uninspiring performances at the theatre, neither of which are likely to endanger our lives, are they? Suppose, though, that we start putting similar pressure on airlines to explain why the black staff they employ are cabin crew and cleaners rather than pilots, or in hospitals, because black people there are more likely to be security guards than brain surgeons. What about nuclear power stations? Suppose that there was pressure to make sure that a black person instead of a white one were in charge there. Can anybody see how such quotas, that is to say, insisting that people be hired according to their ethnicity, could cause problems in those three instances? I say this because the monitoring of skin colour and ethnicity is now used as a very precise tool, and it's not enough to show that a certain percentage of your staff are black. You must also provide a breakdown and explain what is going on if black people are found more among your junior staff than they are at the top of the profession. In the description to this video, I give a link to a bit about the Financial Conduct Authority's new efforts in this field. Allow me to quote: "The FCA said it would expect firms to set at least one target for each of the board, its senior leadership, and in the employee population as a whole." Now, why the Financial Conduct Authority is setting targets in this way is something of a mystery. Our multi-firm review found that existing initiatives to address underrepresentation focus primarily on senior leadership. That's according to the FCA. Yet our analysis of firms' diversity data showed that the sharpest drops in gender and ethnic diversity occurred in the step from junior to mid-level roles, a finding that is consistent with research by FSCB. In short, Increasingly, companies and institutions are being urged to ensure that black people and ethnic minorities are found at the very top in senior positions. Now, unless they're actually being held back by racism, which I find slightly unlikely, it's probably because they don't have high enough educational qualifications or enough work-related experience. But that's going to be disregarded. The truth is that there will be targets to promote them regardless of those things. The results of such a policy, say for an airline, could very well include rushing black people through training in preference to white people and ensuring that a certain number of black pilots are in the air. This is no fantasy on my part. In the description to this video, I give a link to a project called Fantasy Wings. Let me quote what this is about. At Fantasy Wings, our goal is to give black, Asian and minority ethnic women and women a platform to enter and excel in the aviation industry or become commercial airline pilots through expert-led workshops, conferences, mentoring and real flight training. Well, is this just some cowboy outfit, just some race grifters? It's not. Major airlines, the ones that you fly with, are linking up with Fantasy Wings or what's it called now? Yes, Fantasy Wings. And they are desperately keen to get black pilots from them. EasyJet, for example, say on their LinkedIn profile that we're proud to have partnered up with Fantasy Wings, funding opportunities for young people from black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds to launch a career in aviation. Ignore the guff about Asians or women. This is specifically aimed at black people, as so many of these projects are in reality, if not in theory. The Fantasy Wings training programs are free to black people, but if you were white, it would cost many thousands of pounds. I might say that commercial airlines in Britain are now in a race to see who can first push forward young black people to qualify as pilots and start working for their company. It would be a fantastic public relations coup in this day and age. Mediocre opera singers or investment advisors are one thing. I am not at all sure, though, that I fancy being flown around the world by a mediocre airline pilot who has been hired as a publicity stunt just to show how right on and with it the company is. Let me say plainly that hiring people according to their skin colour, whether that is to say because they're white or because they are black, is a truly awful idea. It's bound to lead to trouble, and in this particular case, I can see it's going to lead to disaster.